Welcome to Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. We are doing Thief from 1981 today. It was my choice. I love Micheal Mann. And I have to admit that I don't think I had seen this the whole way through before this episode. Yeah, I know, right? And because it had a home release in 2014, I think, and I just never got to it or got to parts of it. So I really wanted to dive into it. We have Chris with us as always, and we have a special guest, Mike Field from Forgotten Cinema Podcast. Mike, say hello and kind of tell us a little bit about your podcast and about you.
How you doing? Thanks for having me. My podcast is called Forgotten Cinema, and each episode we take a movie that, you always remember the movies that first come out and you watch them with your buddies, and then you don't ever talk about them ever again, and you wonder why you don't. That's not in the general lexicon of conversation. So we break down one of the movies, kind of the same thing you guys do here. It's a little free flowing. We talk about everything around the movie, what we thought about the movie, and just kind of its reception and what audiences thought about it and why it wasn't forgotten. We started this May of 2019, so we're still going strong. And I love talking about movies, so the podcast comes very easy for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you guys are like, season 8 now just started, right?
Yeah, we just started season 8. We break them up so we can just have different things going on. Like our season 5 was audience choice, so we had people throw suggestions at us, and we chose them. It was good to start, but we got some movies that we were just like, oh, I can't find anything nice to say about this one.
I love that. That's good. That's good. What's your latest episode?
The one that just came out was Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
Ooh, nice one.
Nice.
Yeah, we tried to do We've tried to do a few Valentine's Day movies for the month of February. So we did Beautiful Girls before that, and I think next week we've got I Love You to Death, the Kevin Kline movie.
Oh my God, I forgot about that one.
I know.
That's kind of the point of your show.
Exactly.
That's great. So how did you guys did an episode on The Thief back in November? Why did you guys pick that one? Why did it stick out to you?
Well, the one thing about myself and my partner, Mike Butler, the two Mikes, is that he is about 10 to 13 years younger than me. So yeah. I'm in my mid 40s. He's, in his early 30s. And so I've experienced some of these movies that he has never seen before. And so a lot of times I'll pick a movie that I know he hasn't seen because I'm really curious his reaction to it, given his age and the movies that he's been experienced and what I have seen. I love Micheal Mann. So I love his movies. Like you could see his movie and be like, that's a Mann film. Like so when we talk, I talk about all the other Micheal Mann movies, but I never really talk enough about Thief with people. So that's why we had on the list. That's why we wanted to do it, and it paid off because that's one of our favorite episodes.
That's great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. So Chris, do you want to give us the overview on Thief and what it's all about, like the general stuff?
For sure. So, this is a movie that is somewhat forgotten, but it's also kind of emblazoned in us. Can we call ourselves manheads? Is that dumb? It's pretty dumb.
No, it's fine. I'm going with it.
It's something that, a lot of people were waiting for because, like you said, it was not on home video for a long time. And, Dan and I, we were born right after the movie came out. And it's got probably the shortest log line of any movie we've covered here on Film Trace. A former ace safecracker played by James Caan is trying to go straight if he can score one last big heist for the mob. Like that's like classic old school, like one last job. And you think that, I remember throwing this on when it was finally released on home video because, like you, Dan, I've been obsessed with Heat. I actually think, maybe this is heretical, but I maybe like The Insider of a couple notches more.
Ooh. Okay. That's an interesting take.
Yeah. And so I was honestly very skeptical. Like, okay, so it's a debut feature. We'll probably see some of those signature Mann moves, but I'm guessing it's a work in progress. But I remember being so blown away because I don't think it's that much lower in quality than Heat or The Insider.
No, I don't think so at all. It's definitely, and someone said this, Mann just came fully formed, right, in this film. And there's so many things about it that sort of stick out. The style especially the story stuff and sort of the technical aspects are definitely all there, but it's just like the man vibe is there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, is it easy to imitate that vibe? I don't know. It seems pretty specific to him. And you can just pick it out immediately. And there's some shots in here, like I think Heat is probably in my top 5 films of all time, which is kind of maybe ridiculous to say, but it's true. And I watch it once every 2 or a couple times a year. There's just shots in here that beat some of the better shots in Heat. I mean, it's just beautiful stuff in this film. And I think it just kind of started out and talk about what this movie is all about. It has a very, very genre-y start, right? The criminal who had a tough life, was in prison for a long time, I think 10 years or something like that. Basically, all of his 20s were in prison, went to prison essentially for stealing $40. So part of his life has been totally sort of removed. And now he's out still committing crimes, but he wants to go straight. It's a classic tale, classic noir tale. And I think that, from that foundation, that genre foundation, Mann does all of these different flourishes, not just with like the cinematography, but also with the writing and the characters. And James Caan, I mean, he shows up here. And it's interesting do younger people, would they even, number one, know about this movie? And how do they know James Caan? Do they know him from what?
From Elf.
Vegas?
Which is a great movie.
Yeah, right. They're gonna know him from Elf, right? What else? He did the voice in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. He was in Bottle Rocket, which I know is Chris and I is one of our favorite films.
Mm-hmm.
And he almost plays like a parody of himself in that, I think. It seems like. Yeah. And so James Caan is just, super powerful in this. Where do you think this came from, Mann? Why is Mann so fully formed here? Why do we think that is? Like, where did he come from? Like, why is his debut film better than 99% of, films where someone had been doing it for a decade or so? What do you guys think is special about Mann where he sort of showed up and hit a home run on his first film?
He's got great confidence. Great filmmakers have to have confidence in what they want to put on screen. It's not just they're trying to please anyone. They know he has a vision and he's confident in his vision. He wants to use, he wants to be as realistic as possible on screen. Yeah. And I think when you have confidence like that, that's going to show through in anything you do. And he just has a style that he believes in and he goes for it. And it just works. It may not work for some other people, but it works for him.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think he had some success when he was younger, right? Like he got into film, got his master's in film in London, spent some time in the UK doing commercials. Then he got into TV for a while. And then he shows up with Thief and just sort of, I think, knocks it out of the park. It is interesting, though, that, us at our age, we view Thief as like, oh, this is a really good film, obviously. But back then, it kind of was a dud, right? Like it did not really connect with people like it connects with like film nerds and film snobs, right? Which is what we are, right? Let's all be honest. It is fascinating that, like, what do you the one thing that sort of stands out to me in sort of thinking about the film when it came out was that why didn't it connect with people? Why didn't this film, which we see as fully formed and really interesting and up there with Insider, up there with Heat, and especially a movie like Heat, which is just, a cultural icon of a film. What was it about this film and what he was doing here that didn't connect in the 1981? And maybe we don't know because we weren't, adults at that time. But what do you got? What comes to mind as to why this wouldn't connect with that time period?
I mean, I think one of the things to really take into consideration for the context here is the neo-noir genre that was kind of stumbling along for basically 3 decades until the Coen brothers came along, basically, and popularized the genre or revitalized the genre. And, you had, like, once again, great films in retrospect coming out in the 70s and 80s that matched that kind of very atmospheric, moody crime film vibe. But I mean, like Long Goodbye, like it's seen as a masterpiece today, but it was kind of one of Altman's duds back in the day.
Totally, yeah.
The only exception to this rule is probably Chinatown, right?
Sure.
And so I think it's interesting to see that this was kind of like a hit or miss attempt, and Mann making that classic jump from TV to film, and we see it once again. Hindsight is 2020. I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike. Is like he had this confidence, and and his confidence was so singular that one of the probably lines that keep coming up in interviews about the production of Thief is just these arduous work days where they would just put in this elbow grease. And as has been the case so many times before in film history, you have a tendency to, not people don't see that when they see it on the screen for the first time. It takes that time. It takes the aging process to really sit in and congeal until people finally realize like how much specific work went into making this movie, because now we have the whole filmography of Micheal Mann out in front of us, and we can point it all directly back to Thief.
Right.
And that reminds me of like, Mike, go ahead.
I was just gonna piggyback on the why this maybe didn't get acclaimed when it came out. You also have, you're in 81. You're at the beginning of the blockbuster. You have Jaws at 75. You got Star Wars 77, and that's all they're probably looking at. That's all that the studios are probably looking to put money behind, and that's all the audiences are looking for. So maybe this is one of those movies that doesn't fit within that framework of the big summer blockbuster. So it kind of gets lost, which is probably a case for a lot of movies that come out around this time that are just as good as Thief.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like it has a very it has a sheen and a richness to it that may have been over the heads of people, or just sort of in the marketing and stuff. They'd be like, well, what is this all about? Right.
Mann had that confidence, but like overall, the film feels pretty modest, especially for 81. Like like we just mentioned with the log line, like it's a very simple story, and it's quiet, right? There's like this incredible shootout at the end, but other than that, like the movie's pretty low key, especially when you compare it. I mean, Mikey made a great point. 1981, the biggest blockbuster of that year was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and number 2 is On Golden Pond. So like Thief doesn't match with either of those in any way.
It doesn't really register, does it? I guess on that level, and sort of that blockbuster popcorn level. Well, let's dive into how this thing actually came into being, because I think it's a pretty fascinating story. I mean, out of the notes that we have about the conception of this film, the one that really sticks out to me is how it actually got made. Right. So, James Caan sitting on the set of, I guess it's Godfather Chapter 2. He's outside his trailer. Micheal Mann, a guy he doesn't know, says, "Hey, can I talk to you?" He says, "Can I show you a script that I've written?" And then James Caan reads it, and then essentially gets the thing, he loves it, gets this thing in motion, and he gets Jerry Bruckheimer, and I guess his brother also, Ronnie, was a producer on this, which he didn't really produce much after that. It's just a weird sort of, does that happen now? Like, you think about like how this came into being, it seems a lot of happenstance. Number one, why was Micheal Mann on set? Does anybody know? Can we figure that out? Why he was there?
Maybe
Did he sneak on set?
Right, making a commercial next door or an episode of some TV show. And he just wanders over and he's thinking, okay, which of these actors are rich? I'm going to stand by their trailer. But it also seems like, I mean, can you imagine any other actor in this role? That's what seems so insane to me, is that like he walks up to the trailer of this person and it's like a 1 in a million shot, but James Caan is game from get-go.
So one of my notes from our previous episode was that Jeff Bridges was Mann's first choice to play Frank.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I could you guys see that? Like,
no,
how do you? I can see a shimmer of it, but like, no, not the core, core of who this person is.
All I think about is the scene in the diner, and I can't think of anybody else doing that scene but Caan.
No.
And that's not, the scene in the diner is like the one that sticks out. It's James Caan, it's his favorite scene that I think he's ever filmed. He said that multiple times. You're right. It's a very tough scene to pull off as an actor, because I'll be honest, I think some of the dialogue in this film is not great. It's a little hammy, and I think maybe some of that's on purpose because of the genre, but a little of it's sort of not great writing by Mann, and I think we see that play out in his career a little bit more in his later films, Miami Vice. And so without Caan in this film, would it ever really work? And I think that like he is the center of this film for the most part. He's not only the the central actor, but he's one of the reasons it got made. And like this film probably doesn't happen without his connections, without his clout. Micheal Mann didn't know Jerry Bruckheimer, right? So I mean, it's sort of those things where he sort of brought it all together. One thing I note too from like reading sort of the interviews and what Micheal Mann was thinking about this film, the thing that we sort of already brought up, he had this confidence, right? But where does that confidence come from? It comes from a lot of research, it seems like. Like this guy did not go into this script sort of being like, oh, I'm going to write like a noir film or a crime film. He goes in and like reads like technical manuals about how to do stuff like this, how to break into a safe. He talks to criminals and thieves, incessantly, and brings them on set to sort of do this. He has like this level of almost like professionalism in what he's doing to start out that really I think shines through. And like if you look at the stuff where he talks about like what Frank is all about, Frank is not, he's a multi-layered character from the beginning. He's not just like a flat sort of, hey, protagonist, he's a thief, that's it. There's this deep backstory to what's going on here. Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why it works so well. Do you think, in terms of that, I think we can probably agree that one of the reasons why this movie works so well is James Caan. Do we think that that's him mostly, or the script? Like, where does that sort of richness and sort of success come from in the film? Do you think it's the writing or more his acting?
I think that, it's got to be the dynamic. It's got to be the relationship that was formed between Mann and Caan from the start. Because the thing that keeps coming to my mind as you're talking about this, Dan, is we did the episode last week on The Little Things. And there was a strong question about, what went wrong with that movie in the conception and production. And it seemed like there was this very strange dynamic between the writer-director John Lee Hancock and the star Denzel Washington. And there also, once again, you have like this moody, noir-y kind of story with a protagonist that has this very deep, troubled past. But it's just so messy in that movie. And it's so clean in this one. It's deep, yeah. It's complex, yes. But it's like, it's crystal clear all the way through, from the opening shot to the ending shot. You know who this guy is. And so, you think about the conversations and Denzel getting set up in a trailer in 2020. It's very different than like Caan, who's like at the top of his game, less than a decade after The Godfather, and Mann, who's coming out of the gate and had just done all this research, not just for Thief, but the TV movie where he spent a long period of time in Folsom Prison befriending criminals and doing, like one-on-one research there. And also like the reason he kind of got his foot into the game in the first place was because of a short documentary he filmed about the 1968 uprising in Paris, which he was like right in the midst, like in the throes of it. Yeah. So like you've got a guy that's not afraid to put himself in danger and do the work, with another guy who's not afraid of danger or putting in the work. And it's just golden.
No, absolutely. And in terms of like the other people that showed up on this set, who do we think stands out as a side character? Do we think Tuesday Well did pretty well? I mean, that's one of the things that I've heard a little bit of criticism on this film, is that they think her performance is kind of okay. I mean, Robert Prosky is, I think, amazing. Willie Nelson, James Belushi. Who do you guys think, Mike, who do you think really stood out as a side character here?
Probably Prosky. I think Tuesday Weld is just a little underwritten. I mean, I don't know if I think a lot of her stuff was taken out too. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but I know that I don't think Mann was a big fan. But Prosky, that was like, I think this was Prosky's first film.
Yeah,
like,
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because you have Prosky has to be terrifying. He has to be scary enough for Caan, but Caan is already terrifying, so it's kind of tough to. I mean, it's kind of tough to over terrify Caan. Like, one of my notes was that so the scene where James Caan is looking at the doctor, and it's when they're in the hospital, and I guess Caan decided he was just going to stare at the doctor and not say anything, and like the reaction from the doctor when he's like, "Is everything all right?" That was like legit. The actor was scared. He didn't know. He didn't realize what was going on. And Caan scared him. So it's like, geez, it's like, I mean, but I think Prosky does it's no nonsense. He does a good job of just laying it out and basically kind of pushing Caan to the point at the end where it's like, you have to be able to burn everything and go. You just have to be able to do that. So I think Prosky mostly.
Yeah.
That one scene where they have Barry, I guess James Belushi, where he's dead and they dip him, I guess, whatever he dip him. His little thing there, like that, James Caan is scary, but somebody like that, Prosky, saying stuff like that and the way that he's saying it, that's like riveting and terrifying at the same time. Like, you believe him.
Oh yeah.
You believe him that he will do those things to you and your family, and he will not hold back. And he has that sort of super authoritative sort of stance there, which I thought he was fantastic. What do you guys make of Willie Nelson and Belushi in this?
I mean, I knew it from the time that I saw Curly Sue in the theater as a 9-year-old. I was like, this guy's going places. He's not just he's not just John's brother. No, yeah. I mean, honestly, like, one of the most satisfying roles I've seen James Belushi in is probably the 3rd season of Twin Peaks. And that's kind of where my opinion of him changed pretty abruptly. And that was also right around the time when I saw Thief for the first time. And so having that back to back, and I didn't know, not knowing that James Belushi was going to show up in Thief when I turned it on, it was just, it just felt like kismet. It's like he's kind of finally found his way to go full circle. And now both James Belushi and Caan are like Twitter darlings, as like, funny old grandpas that don't know how to tweet. And there's like this, there is something there. I think a lot of the movie's underwritten, and that's kind of part of the point of it, is that it's, traffics and archetypes. And there's going to be some downsides to that. But honestly, like, I really I wanted to see more. I almost wanted like a spin-off TV series where we see more of like the jobs that Belushi and Caan do together. It's small, but like even just him like walking out of the ocean, and like, of course, he has like this beautiful girl on the side, and he's just like this schlubby guy, but he's a great sidekick. I loved watching it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that a point you brought up there about the jobs themselves, and that's definitely a manism, where he shows the specific and technical details of how to break into a safe throughout this film. There's two main scenes. The opening one, I think, is very fantastic, but the main job in Los Angeles, where I don't even know what they're doing. I can't really, I'm not into, like, I don't know, smelting. Is that what you call that? I don't know what they're doing.
They're burning. That's the huge rod of metal that gets super hot, and he's just pushing it through the safe to burn all the mechanisms out. So burning a hole through it. No,
I mean, those scenes are just
awesome.
I mean, is that like a dude thing? Is that a male thing to like be really fascinated by like melting metal? That really got me, like, one of my favorite scenes in this movie is where Barry is doing voltage detection on lines to figure out whether it's a phone line or not. And I was like, I could literally just watch them do that for 20 minutes and just go back. And there's something almost like a slow TV element to it where it becomes very hypnotic. That is one of his trademarks.
Right. It's one of those connections, I feel, of going back to Prosky's character, of like the paternalism. Right. Like, I get total vibe. Like, I mean, I grew up with a single mom, but I got total vibes of like, just like sitting and watching a dad do stuff. And it's just like, oh, cool. That's how you do it. And it just there's something comforting and just nurturing about it.
No, absolutely. I think one thing we should talk about too, we talk about the production, obviously James Caan talks about, they started Monday mornings at 6 a.m., worked for 18 hours straight, and that was like a normal day for them. That's pretty intense, I would say. And I think Mann sort of brings that intensity and has his entire career. Do we see that sort of play out in the film? Does it seem like a movie that has been labored over on that level in terms of not just the writing, but actually, the shots and the cinematography? Does it have, do you think that level of production is shown through in what we see?
Well, everything's very dirty and gritty. So I think, I mean, if everybody looks worn down, I think it's on purpose. It's just, it adds to it. Just everything. Like, one of the things I love about 70s films and early 80s films is just how nothing looks perfect. It's all just, it just reminds me of indie features, indie films. And, there's a bit of a connection there with me that I just like that. I don't like everything being perfect on screen. I don't mind the dirt. So I think it only adds to it.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because like Mann has that weird high-low element to his work, right? Like there's shots in this. The one that really sticks out in my head is after the scene where Prosky sort of warns him what he's going to do to his family and stuff. He's driving to his car deal, or no, actually before that, he's driving to his car dealership, and it's like a shot of the hood of his car, right, with all of the neon signs reflecting off it, and he holds it for like 10 seconds with this beautiful soundtrack in the back. So there is this almost poetry to what he's doing, this lushness, but at the same time, you're right, it's super gritty. And if you think about, especially the ending with the blood and the violence, it's almost like a little bit over the top. He does that sort of back and forth really easily. And is that something that we think went on throughout his career? Do we see that in Miami Vice, or was Miami Vice not good because it was all the sheen and not the grittiness?
I mean, oh no, you're opening up a can of worms. I want to stay in 81. I don't want to talk about. I mean, I think that the shortest answer that I can muster to that question is like, I mean, it's a similar issue, I think, with like musicians, right? Is that I mean, we are almost always more drawn to early work because it feels more raw. It's like they're still figuring stuff out. They're younger, and I mean, I think Micheal Mann, for better or worse, like I don't like. There's things I like about Miami Vice and Public. And no, I can't even say that. But it just like he's kind of running things by the numbers. I have to admit, I still haven't seen Black Hat, and I don't know if I should.
Well, I kind of want to dig deeper on that part of it, though. Like I would say that as someone who loves his work, Thief, Manhunter, and like going up to Heat, there's definitely a period there where it's like, oh, like this is fine, all cylinders, right? As you get to Miami Vice and Black Hat, which I did see, unfortunately, there seems to be something missing, and I want to find out what's missing. What's in Thief that's not in Miami Vice and not in Black Hat?
Well, is Miami Vice here? I know there's an extended version of Miami Vice. Did you see that? Because I have
not seen the direct. No,
I heard that's better. I heard that's much better. So yeah, But I will say this: like with Collateral, even because it's shot all on digital, it's got that graininess to it. It's got that dirt that kind of is reminiscent. And with The Insider, that kind of adds to the docudrama of it, just because it's just what the subject matter is about. So I think those two films stand out to me as in terms of maybe more earlier period Mann than maybe newer. He doesn't have a lot of he doesn't have a huge stable of films that you can really go to. So he whether he picks and chooses or whether he just needs something to inspire him.
Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's just something special about this one though. Right, about Thief in general. There is, and maybe it's the Chicago part of it, which is almost like its own character in this film. And I think I forget who said this in one of the reviews, but Chicago is, I guess, the real. I think it was Scott Tobias in The Dissolve. He said Chicago's the real villain in this movie, and not just the city, but the type of corruption that runs Chicago. And I would say, and I think I said this in a text to Chris, this is the only movie I've ever seen that makes Chicago look cool. Because we grew up in this sort of shadow of Chicago. We know Chicago super well. We're there all the time growing up. And it never came across as a cool place to me.
Not even The Fugitive? Not even The Fugitive?
I mean, The Fugitive. Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But is Chicago cool in the Fugitive? It's more just like upper middle class. He's running around Chicago.
Yeah,
this just has
cool
like
set pieces.
this like almost makes it seem as cool as New York, which of course it's not. But there's something about it, like how the Chicago environment. How do you guys think that really played into like? Could you set this in Phoenix and it would be the same?
Oh hell no! I think it might be as simple as this. And I thought of this when you mentioned James Caan being in Bottle Rocket, and Wes Anderson was also kind of the director that managed to come pretty fully formed. Maybe not as fully formed as Mann, because he hadn't experience with commercials and TV like Mann did. But Anderson set his debut in the town that he was born and grew up in. And Mann did the same thing here with Thief. Like, he very easily, it might have been easier for him to say, oh, it's fine, let's just shoot it in LA or New York. And it would still have been a very good movie. But the fact that he didn't, and the fact that it is one of the few neo-noirs that isn't set in LA or New York, makes it that much more special. And I think one other aspect of this that is just like turns everything on its head. Well, first of all, I did want to mention real quick that the fact that so much of it is set at night, right?
Of course,
Chicago does not look pretty in the daytime.
No.
That's part of it. But then, and I say that too as a precursor to this. I mean, we haven't mentioned the music a lot yet. I mean, Tangerine Dream's soundtrack, and I mean that's coming from Germany. And so when you're like, and there's also kind of like this almost like Asian influence of the lights and symmetry and reflective imagery, where you're basically showing Chicago through this filter of this very worldly view. There's a guy, our director, born in Chicago, educated in Wisconsin, and then spent a large part of the beginning of his adult life in Europe. And so it's like looking at it through this interesting kaleidoscope. Like there's even like glimmers of like I think one of the things in the Criterion essay is how it almost feels a little bit like Blade Runner coming the year after.
Yeah, totally.
The way the colors and the industriousness of the setting feel. And I mean that was the key to it, is like finding the beauty of Chicago in the nighttime and in the background music and all of that. And that's ultimately what makes Thief so singular in a visual and sonic sense. And I think that's what makes Chicago work so well for it.
Well, it's interesting. Like in one of the interviews, he said he wanted to put Chicago blues in it because that's sort of the music that he fell in love with in Chicago. And sort of, he basically said, I went away from that because I wanted, what does he say? I felt that would be so regionally specific in the music choice. It would make Frank's experience specific only to Frank.
Yeah.
So I wanted the kind of transparency, if you like, the formality of electronic music, and hence Tangerine Dream. That's a pretty astute, that's a pretty amazing choice when you think about it. Like if someone's thinking on that level, that's just, I don't know, that doesn't seem like a normal filmmaker would think that way.
Right.
Like that's a very sort of maybe pretentious.
It's a left field choice. And in the DVD commentary, I read a write-up on that in Film School Rejects. Like Caan is constantly making fun of Mann for having chosen Tangerine Dream, because especially for somebody like Caan, who's like this like rough and tumble working class guy, but then also went off to acting school. He's like totally lost with this left field choice. He would think like either do the blues thing because that makes sense. It's low class according to the archetype, or you go with the traditional orchestral score. And I mean, that's just so amazing. I mean, obviously it wasn't that out of place in the 80s, but the fact that he centers it so much in the film is what makes it so special, I think.
Mike, what did you make of the music in this? Do you think that like it adds a lot to it?
It's funny. Wasn't this their first movie that they scored?
I think it was. It was one of the first that they actually did. Yeah,
because I know they got like a Razzie nomination.
Right. Yeah.
I can't even fathom. That's
Well,
one of the
that's
reasons
the
I
thing,
asked that
yeah.
question. It's like, why did this not? It seems like some of this film just did not connect with 1991 at all,
Well,
and the music must have been part of it.
watching it when the music comes on at first, you're just kind of like, what? This doesn't make it doesn't fit. But then it's looking back on it from 40 years from, you're just like, well, it's the 80s. Okay, this makes sense. But back then, when it first came on, I can imagine people were just like, what you know what I mean? They must have been expecting the usual suspects in terms of music beats and you know what this type of movie would come. Okay, well, this is the type of score it's going to be. But it's just thinking back and watching it, I'm perfectly okay with it. I like it a lot. I think it gives it adds something to it, but I can understand it being off-putting for somebody who's not familiar with Tangerine Dream or not familiar with their, ascension in the 80s. It's, and just kind of like where they come from and where they are now, where they were now. Just I can see it both ways. I love it. I mean, it fits for me because you get into it. See, from the start though, with this movie, from the start when he's busting into that safe, and then you realize that he's really busting into that safe. It's not fake. It's not props. They bought a safe. They bought all the tools. Like when you realize that, you're like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's see some more. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
This is totally legit.
So the music just adds to that.
And what I'm realizing right now, I mean, we're talking about 1981. This is also the year of Escape from New York and John Carpenter's, iconic synth score, 3 years after Halloween. And I mean, I think that there's also like that grittiness to that movie that where, like you were saying, Mike, if you matched it with something else gritty sonically, it would either be too much or it would be rote. But by juxtaposing it with this kind of buzzing electronic music, it hits harder.
Yeah.
Like I think the movie would be a little less memorable, a little less special if they went with something a little more traditional or went with the weird blues idea.
It kind of makes you pay attention. It makes you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think it's one thing too. There's multiple things in this film that, part of it seems pretty genre, pretty cliche, very simple story. But there's all these interesting flourishes, the music, I think Frank almost like cites the Communist Manifesto when he's talking to Leo and about his money. I mean, that was like word for word Marx, what he's saying about worker being alienation, my labor, all this sort of stuff. You wouldn't hear that in a normal sort of film in 1981, I don't think. And then it's interesting too, like Mann did an interview about this, and someone asked him about the movie Drive. And he goes, Thief has a different purpose. If someone asks me what's Thief to you, to me it's a left existentialist critique of corporate capitalism. That's what Thief is. What is interesting is that no critics in the US got that. No critics in the UK got that. Every critic in France got it when the film came out. It was like a crazy kind of cultural litmus test or something. I think Mann said that like in 2014 or something. That's, watching this film, and I've watched it a couple of times, and like that's a little bit of my background is sort of the Marxist left critique stuff. Like I did that sort of literary theory in school. I saw that in the film, but I can't even imagine what a normal viewer, when they hear that stuff, do they pick up on that? Number one. Two, is it jarring? Does it make it seem weird or odd? And if Mann had this intention, how does that sort of play out in the film? Did you guys see that? Do you think it's a left existentialist critique of corporate capitalism?
Well, you take that one, Mike.
Go for it, Mike.
I would assume that man was drinking one night and he was just probably like, talking about it with it. Oh yeah, that's exactly what it's about. Like Drive. I like Drive, but does Drive get made if they didn't watch Thief? I mean, I love, you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thing. Like Drive is almost like, oh, I watch Thief or movies like Thief, and I want to do something like that inspired me. Thief is just kind of like out of note, like Mann, it's from Mann, so it's like it's just from his own experience, and I think that's what makes it a little bit more special. But no, he's totally sitting sitting on the stage and just kind of like pontificating to a whole bunch of film guys, about like what he thinks.
Yeah. And of course I would eat it up. I'd be like, oh wow, what a genius.
It works.
Yeah.
It works, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, there's an interesting detail that Caan points out, because he was kind of in on it, supposedly, depending on what version of this you believe, but that he specifically used the word elected when he is referring to like the basically the argument with Prosky's character, right? And is that a clue, because it's a pretty esoteric word, especially for a thief in a crime movie to use in the 80s. But also, I think Mann made a good point in a lot of his research done at Folsom Prison and during the uprising in France, where he wanted to really add into it. And if he did it on purpose, in advance of this and not, pontificating, I think that's very possible many years after the fact. He did it with this knowledge in mind that he wants to respect the kind of character that Caan is playing, right? That in most cases, with all that time that's spent in prison, especially people that are prone to want to educate and do things on their own, and a lot of criminals are, because they're self-made people, even if they get caught and put to prison, they do end up educating themselves on a lot of these kinds of theories or practicalities, because like one of the only things they have access to, other than workout equipment and working in a license plate factory, is books. And I did like that there was an element there that there's a possible reading anyways. It's not overt. There's a possible reading here that Caan's character did do a lot of thinking about what he wanted his life to be like when he eventually got released. And it wasn't just in terms of like, I want to take over Willie Nelson's thievery business and make bank. It's that he wanted to make sure that he was taking back the means of production. I don't know.
There you go, Chris. I love that. That's good. What do we, that's interesting you say that. One of the things that sticks out to me in this movie, and I connect it directly to Robert De Niro's character in Heat, is this clear vision of what they want. James Caan's, Frank's collage in this is kind of bizarre.
Yeah, it's
right?
That's
kind of a weird thing. What do we like? What is Mann going for there? Like, here's just a man that has lost a lot and knows exactly what he wants and what he's going for. Do you think Mann's like criticizing that concept of having a specific plan because he ends up burning down his bar and his business and sending his wife away? Like, what is Mann? Do you guys think, in terms of having that specific vision and how it ends? What is he trying to say here?
You can't tame that beast. You can't control that life. Caan's got an idea that he's going to do it his way, and he's going to, change his fortune. And like you even see that when he tries to adopt the kid, and he starts flipping out because they won't let him have the kid, and he just starts, I don't care, I'll take anything. It's just like he wants what he wants, and he's not going to, be deterred. Even like you have the when he's trying to adopt the kid, and then when they have that great moment in the courthouse when he's trying to bribe the judge and they're throwing up the fingers and the lawyers, so
the bribe,
so he's somebody who wants to get what he wants, but basically at the end he can't have that. He has to come to that realization when he's staring in the mirror at the end and it freeze frames and he's like staring at himself. It's almost like at that moment he's like, it's just not going to happen, and he's got to burn it all down. And I think that the whole postcard, the collage is just, it's nice to think about, but Frank's got to realize it's not going to ever happen.
Yeah. There's a great quote from Mann, who's usually verbose, but a very simple response to the question, where is Caan's character walking to after the shootout at the end, right? There's that beautiful slow lift as he walks down the sidewalk, camera at his back, and Mann responds to the question, he's going nowhere.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I mean, that's so maybe there is an existential piece to this that was thought out. So
I think there is. I think it's pretty explicit, the existentialist part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he literally he he has this, he burns everything down. Like,
Right.
why did he have to do that, right? It doesn't actually kind of make sense on some level. He was going to kill Leo and his crew no matter what. Why does he have to get rid of the rest of his life? There's a very sort of deliberate act of erasure of like, I'm starting over again, which is something that I think, some people do. I've done it myself, I haven't murdered people. But I've definitely,
and now it's on tape.
Yeah, wait a second. The internet's forever. No, but I think that like there's a very sort of specific thing that he is going for and trying, like an itch that he's trying to scratch with I think specifically the male viewer, where it's sort of like this desire to just really become something brand new. Right. And when it doesn't work out, you just burn it all down, get rid of it, and start over again. I mean, it's also a very American thing, the constantly striving towards a new life, a better life, something new, so future oriented, and the past is basically meaningless. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what we love about this film. I think we got to say some negative things. What are some bad things about Thief?
Well, I did want to.
What's something that's not great about this?
There's a couple quotes, because, like you said, it was not very well received when it came out. And we talk a lot about the more modern critics that either bash or praise a lot of these films, and we see whether or not, according to critical acclaim, did these films succeed. And there is a guy that I've done a lot of reading of that I kind of hate. From the New York Times, his name's Vincent Canby. He was at probably the towards the end of his career at the Times when Thief came out, and he was basically panning everything. But he has a very interesting quote in his negative review of the film. Mr. Mann may well become a very good theatrical filmmaker, but among other things, he's going to have to learn how to edit himself, to resist the temptation to allow dialogue that is colorful to turn all of a sudden into deep, abiding purple. I disagree, clearly, because I've been saying nothing but good things about this movie, but there is a reading of this movie that I think is somewhat fair, that because it so heavily traffics in archetypes, and there are some cornball moments, especially if you take the Razzies side of how the soundtrack plays in conjunction with it. But there are a couple moments, I guess, in the movie where I'm like, it takes me out. Like, I don't feel that gritty realism, or I'm too taken aback by just how silly it all is, even if I'm considering the time period that it's 40 years ago now, as of this year. Where, like, for instance, I had similar issues with Manhunter, which is kind of crazy to say because so many people love that movie, and I, in many ways, love that movie. But the shootout scene at the end is a little much. It's a little corny.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. Like, I read that interview or the review. I was like, that's terrible. That's all wrong. But it's interesting. I think I found someone who's a real man hater, if you will, Richard Brody at the New Yorker, who I have a weird love-hate relationship with. Sometimes I love his work, sometimes I actually hate it. I came across this. I haven't read the whole thing. I read parts of it, but check this out: the stylish, empty realism of Micheal Mann. So they did like a retrospective at BAM of all his films, and he really ripped to shreds. I mean, it's like really fascinating how he goes down. He basically, what he's essentially saying is that Mann is just style, and there's not really a lot of substance behind him. And I have to completely disagree. Like, you look at all the notes that we have for this movie and everything that he's talking about, there's so much intention in the substance here. So I don't really, but it's, if you are kind of that school of thought, check that out. Richard Brody at the New Yorker wrote that like 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a good refutation of Micheal Mann's career. So Mike, where do you place Thief in sort of your ranking of Micheal Mann films in his career? Where would you put it, you think?
What's my favorite Mann film then? Let's see.
And where's Thief? Is like Thief up there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I really like The Insider. I love the performances in The Insider. That's just Russell Crowe's really good in that. And he's so it's really good. I like Heat, but I mean, there's nothing. Heat overall, I probably obviously the scene I like the most is the scene that everybody likes is the shootout. But that scene is that shootout is probably you could make an argument that's like maybe your top 5 scenes of all time in terms of in that kind of genre. It's just no music. It's just the action. It's just so good. I really probably say Thief is up there. It's got to be top 1 or 2. I mean, he hasn't done a lot. That's the thing. It's just he hasn't done
a ton.
Ali for me was a little long. I thought that was it. Just Manhunter's got. It's tough with Manhunter because I like Manhunter, but I have seen Lecter done a bunch of different times now. That you instantly compare that with the other ones. So it kind of when you look back on it, you're just kind of just comparing it, and you're just like, I kind of like this one better. I like this Lecter better. I like this story about surrounding that better.
Have you seen Blackadder? You've seen Blackadder?
I've seen parts. I've not seen it completely, but I've seen enough where I'm like, okay.
No, pass. It's not worth it. I'm telling you right now, it's not worth it. It's got Ferrari coming up in 2022.
I'd have to say Thief's up there. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what. I want to see The Keep, and I have yet to see it. And I was reading about The Keep, and I was like, oh, this sounds so like just off the wall. I need to see this movie.
It's bonkers. It's a bonkers film.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that's Thief. Mike, what's the next episode you guys got coming up here on Forgotten Cinema?
Coming up this week, we've got I Love You to Death with Kevin Kline and Tracy Ullman, River Phoenix, Keanu Reeves, a bunch of people in this movie. It's based on a true tale.
Love it. Love it. We'll check that out. And then Chris, what do we got coming up next week on Film Trace?
Yeah, so I'm picking the new movie. I decided to spare us of trying to pick apart Malcolm and Marie, though it seems like you already did that yourself, Dan. I don't know why.
One of the worst experiences of my life watching that movie.
So instead, coming to VOD this Friday is the new Kristen Wiig comedy, Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. It's one of the last remnants of incessant trailers from my time at the movie theater, way back when those were still open. And it's finally coming out, and it looks like it might be terrible. It might be a curio. It might be actually secretly hilarious. I don't know.
We will find out. I am highly skeptical and worried about watching this. Anyway, this has been Film Trace. Mike from Forgotten Cinema, thank you for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thanks for having me. Have a good time. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. All right. Bye.